Good morning and welcome you all to our 19th edition of Mydbops webinar. Today I'm going to talk about top 10 features in MySQL 8 and how it improves your database performance. And a quick introduction about me. I am Vinoth Kanna, co-founder of Mydbops, certified MySQL and MongoDB professional and having over a decade of experience in handling mission critical database systems. And in MyDBOps, we offer database consulting services and database managed services for top open source databases like MySQL, MongoDB, and Postgres. Here comes the agenda of today's presentation. Initially, we will be having an overview of MySQL 8, followed by top 10 features focused on performance, consistency, scalability, and security, and operations. This presentation will be beneficiary for database engineers, database administrators, reliability engineers, and SREs who willing to explore MySQL 8.0 to upgrade, and as well as they want to know about the features of MySQL 8. And so a quick overview of MySQL 8. MySQL 8 stable release was made on 19th April 2018. And it was a feature-packed release of MySQL with major architectural and source code changes. And this has been widely adopted by the industry recently. And it is evolving a lot with minor releases, and new features are being added at a very fast pace. And let's start with the features of MySQL 8. And to start with, the features that provide the stability and consistency over the database operations, those are transactional database, transactional data dictionary, and atomic DDL. So to start with, what is a data dictionary, right? So data dictionary means the structures, like the structure of your schema. So those were stored in various places earlier, like in file system, in MyXam table spaces, and InnoDB. So those were now consolidated and put up in a much better fashion that we are going to look into in upcoming slides. So the problem with this kind of model is, so as you can see here, some of the files are file system level and some of the files are in a different storage engines. And there is a system tables, which again is an InnoDB. So when an SQL optimizer has to gather the insights about the schema or statistics, it has to scan through different modes of protocols. Like for example, there will be a different protocol for file handling, and there will be a different protocol for reading the data from the MyXam storage engine, and there will be a different protocol for InnoDB. So to avoid all this complexity in MySQL 8, it has been made simple. The data dictionary, the complete data dictionary has been transformed to a InnoDB storage engine. It is called as data dictionary storage engine. So there will be a single table space named mysql.ibd, so which hosts all the data dictionary information. So this makes the SQL optimizer job simpler, and it is made to scale. This change in data dictionary brings to a added advantage of having an atomic DDL. What is an atomic DDL? So atomic DDL is nothing but when we coordinate the metadata updates, binary log writes, and redo log writes combine into a single atomic operation, we term it as an atomic DDL. So why it is important? In case if there is any interruption in terms of an DDL in progress, there can be a lot of things that can go wrong. For example, table space can get corrupted, or there can be partially removed files, like it can be an orphan IBD file. Sometimes we can see in the database, like when the database getting crashed during the execution of the alter. By introduction of this atomic DDL and transactional data dictionary, we were able to achieve this. Like when you initiate an DDL, it is getting first recorded into a MySQL system table space named as InnoDB DDL log, post which it performs a prepare and perform operation. So when the DDL is getting recorded onto the DDL log, it plans out the roll forward and rollbacks mechanisms and store it into the system table space. Then it performs the prepare and perform. Perform implements the changes that is mentioned as per the DDL. So in this case, when it is success, it commits the DDL and post DDL cleanup happens at the DDL log. When it fails, it gets rolled back and post DDL is performed. In terms of any crash in between these phases, it goes to a recovery during the startup. When it sees an entry in the DDL log, it goes and checks whether that particular DDL has reached a commit phase or not. If the commit phase is reached, it rolls forwards and commits the transaction and performs the post DDL operation. If the commit phase is not reached, it rollbacks the particular DDL. So this makes the schema changes much more efficient, and it's leading us to a crash safe data dictionary and consistency in handling the table definitions. And by storing all these statistics and schema information into a single table space makes the information schema much faster, because earlier you have to scan through all the files, all the schema files before it can build up the temp table and cater you the results. Here, since it's an all InnoDB direct table back views, so it is much faster. And in fact, it is 30 times faster when compared to an older version. And this also removes all non-transactional components in the architecture. And it is a simple and clean architecture for the data dictionary. And next comes to the performance improvements. InnoDB has evolved a lot in terms of ACID compliance. Like for example, InnoDB has undo logs, redo logs, and Doublewrite buffer to ensure the ACID. In MySQL 8 release, we have all these components revamped, and the gaps in the performance were addressed in this 8.0 release that we are going to have a look at it. First comes the Undolog enhancements, and we had a detailed presentation on what are the Undolog enhancements that has been done and how it is impacting our performance in our last 17th webinar. So I'm just going to give a highlight over this. So starting from 8.0.11, this Undolog threads were segregated from the main thread, and it allowed the customization. Like for example, previously a single thread was used to handle the redo operation and all the background operations. In 8.0, there was a segregation that log writer thread was added, and followed by the page tracking and archiver was added on 8.0.17, which helps to take a backup of the redo log at particular point of time. This is helpful in terms of taking backups and replaying it over the time. This features is taken advantage from the MySQL extra backup, where it stores the archived redo log during the time of backup. And 8.0.21 brings one more major feature to disable the redo log. To have an ACID compliance, we should not be disabling redo log, but disabling redo log will have a direct impact on performance and decrease the storage utilization by almost 30 to 40%. So this will be useful when you want to load a huge chunk of data during the initial load. And one more major release that came into is 8.0.30, which brought us dynamic redo log file sizing. That happened on July 26, 2022. So the first thing is about disabling of redo log. So disabling of the redo log is online, and it can be done by a simple alter command. So, and it can be useful for one-time data loading and data migration. And for a regular OLTP workload, this should not be disabled because you will be compromising on the ACID properties. And next comes the dynamic redo log sizing. Introduced in 8.0.30, the previous variables that were used to maintain the InnoDB log files, like InnoDB log files in group and InnoDB log file size, are now depreciated, and it will be removed in the future release. Now the two redo logs, IB log file 0 and IB log 1 is now split into 32 redo log files. And a single variable has been introduced, which divides the overall size of the redo log into 32 individual files. And this also allows this release also allows the redo log file capacity to be adjusted in the real time without needing the restart of the MySQL service. And second comes the Undolog enhancements. In the Undolog enhancements, the Undolog table space was implemented in 5.7, and which was not a default option. And in MySQL 8, it has become a default option, and Undologs are no longer created into a system table space. And dedicated Undolog files are created during the startups, and the variable Undolog truncate is on by default. So whenever it reaches the Undolog max size, it automatically truncates the operations. This avoids the bloating of the Undologs and needing to restart the MySQL service to free up the Undolog table space. And you can also create more user-defined Undologs, and drop is supported for those newly created Undologs. And it has also fixed, this release has also fixed a lot of pitfalls when performing an Undolog truncate operation under heavy workload. There were stalls during the Undolog truncate operation in the MySQL 5.7 release, which were being addressed in the 8.0 release. And next comes the Doublewrite enhancements. In Doublewrite, it's segregated from the system table space in MySQL 8. Starting from 8.0.30, Doublewrite can be turned on and off online without a service restart. The versions prior to 8.0, it was a static variable. Now it has become a dynamic variable. And this gives us more control again when there is a need for a higher disk throughput and increased write latency, reduce the write latency and increase the throughput. Like when heavy data processing, like ingesting heavy data to MySQL, we will be able to disable the Doublewrite on runtime. And both of the combined, like redo log disabling and Doublewrite disabling, can improve your write ingestion by almost 100%. And this Doublewrite buffer is also stored in a dedicated directory, can be stored in a dedicated directory, and the number of files created for Doublewrite will be twice as that of the buffer pool instances. And next features that will be much interesting to share is on the security part. First comes the account management. In the account management, we have in MySQL 8, we have roles, static privileges, dynamic privileges, and newly added multi-factor authentication and partial revokes. Given the interest of time, some of the features are generally discussed, and we will be discussing on the partial revokes. The first one is the roles. Roles is nothing but a custom set of privileges. We can create it as a role, and the role can be assigned to a user for simplicity. It avoids redundancy in providing grants to multiple users. For example, in an organization with 100+ developers, you don't have to define the roles, define the grants for the individual users. You can create a profile-based roles, and you can assign the roles to particular users. And static privileges or the legacy grants, where you have a simple insert, update, and replication. Direct privileges that can be associated to a global level or a schema level. And now we have more curated privilege to perform a specific action. Those are called as dynamic privileges, like binlog admin, backup admin, session admin. Privileges are added to the MySQL 8 release, which allows to give particular privilege to an user without needing to have a super user access. For example, in the older release, we had to give super privilege to change the variables and to take a to purge the bin logs or to perform any administrative actions. Now, without giving complete pseudo super privilege, we can able to give dynamic privilege, which is curated to perform the specific set of action. This is an added security feature so that we can only allow required grants to a specific user. And this MySQL 8 release adds multi-factor authentication and biometric authentication using a FIDO protocol. In multi-factor authentication, we can enable 2-factor as well as 3-factor also. And the next important and interesting feature about account management is the partial revokes. So this is one of the important feature in MySQL 8 account management. Without this feature, it will be much difficult to handle this type of a schema account privilege adoption. For example, if you want to give access to all the tables except one table, it will be much difficult in MySQL because either you can only give a global privilege or either you can give a table-wise privilege. When you give higher precedence privileges, the lower precedence privilege will not be taken into effect. So this partial revokes allows to overlay the schema level privilege on top of the global privilege and to only apply the intersect of it. With this approach, I can able to revoke certain access to certain schemas while giving grants to the rest of the schemas. So in this user, I have skipped the PII information with a simple 2-line grant statements. In the first statement, I have granted the select access to all the database and tables to this user, and I revoke the select on user profile, which holds the PII information. This can be applied with any kind of combinations as well. So this simplifies the action in legacy grants profile. Like we have to specify the privileges for each of the tables for this particular user. And this will be a very complex to understand or to view into that. So this partial revokes enables the ease of operations and maintains a clean grant statements. And next important features about the security is the controllable and complete encryption. With MySQL 8.0, we will be able to encrypt all of the MySQL components like system table space, general table space, file per table table space, redo logs, undo logs, Doublewrite buffer, bin logs, and relay logs. And in MySQL 8.0.16, there is a variable named default table encryption is introduced. These variables enable encryption for all the general table space and user created schemas. MySQL 8.0.16 introduces granular controls that helps to ease the operations. Like when default table space encryption is enabled, you don't have to specify encryption for individual tables. When default table space encryption is enabled, all the user created schemas, all the user created tables will be encrypted automatically. In 5.7, in 8.0 or older, it was not possible. You have to define the encryption individual for individual tables. This is the entire system level option. And if you don't want a system level option and you want a schema level option, you can still go for it. You can able to define an encryption for particular schema, which automatically encrypts all the tables inside the particular schema. In a similar way, general table space, redo logs, undo logs, bin logs, and relay logs can be encrypted as well. So to avoid not having encryption, we can enable table encryption privilege check equal to true. So when we enable that, it will not allow us to create a table without an encryption. So these are the added perks of using MySQL 8 Like you can able to ensure that none of the table is there without proper encryption. So this guarantees the data address to 100%. And the next important feature in terms of a database operation is the clone plugin. So the clone plugin was introduced in MySQL 8.0.17. This helps to copy or take a backup of existing data locally and remotely. And the installation of the plugin is very simple, and it has a granular control over the system resources. We can able to define how much CPU it has to use, how much core it has to use, how much disk throughput it has to use. All those can be configured. It is faster than all the available backup methods, and the progress can be tracked better with performance schema. The only caveat for using this is only InnoDB engine is supported. And once you clone the instance, then the replication setup has to be manually configured. So this is a comparison of the clone plugin with our existing backup and recovery methodologies. We can see that clone plugin beats all other available backup and restore methodologies by a huge margin. Next comes the DDL improvements in MySQL 8.0. And the first and important thing is the instant column addition. This patch has been ported from Tencent Games DBA team. And it was initially supported for adding columns at the last of the column position or last ordinal position of the table, not in the middle of the existing columns. From 8.0.28, this supported rename of the column, and from 2.9, it added the feature to add column to any position of any ordinal position of the table, and it also added a support for drop column. As you can see that this instant column has been instant column addition and instant algorithm has been evolving a lot since the implementation. And we could see like more options to come in to the instant algorithm in the upcoming releases. And other DDL improvements in MySQL 8 includes like the revamped truncate handling has made the truncates 250 times faster than the previous truncate operations. It achieves this by doing a lazy removal of data from the buffer pool. Instead of scanning the entire data and cleaning up the buffer pool, it now just marks the table as a truncated and cleans up lazily, by thus improving the speed of the truncates and avoiding the stalls in the MySQL. And one more feature that was introduced in MySQL 8.0.30 was SQL generate invisible primary key. By enabling this, it will create an auto-generated invisible auto-increment primary key. This will be helpful in replication and switching to InnoDB cluster, which mandates the primary key. So if you are facing challenges in migrating your systems or tables to a cluster, but you don't have primary key, that is the mandatory for using InnoDB cluster, you can still enable this option and run this. Like it creates a row identifier with an auto increment primary key, which will be much useful when in terms of archiving and performing a schema changes. And in 8.0.27, features like parallel secondary index creation is developed. Like it allows us to configure number of parallel threads that can be used for the secondary index creation and like multiple secondary indexes can be created with different multiple threads of the MySQL, and thus by utilizing the resources that is available in the MySQL. This made the secondary index creation 100 times faster. And regarding the query performance improvements, we have features like functional index, invisible index, and descending index, CTE and window functions. And from MySQL 8.0.20, we have contention-aware transaction scheduling takes over the legacy FIFO scheduling. When it comes to functional indexes, now in 8.0, we will be able to create functions, indexes for queries in the function. So earlier we had to rewrite the query to avoid using the function on the left-hand side of the query. So this can be now optimized by adding a functional index, thus by effectively reducing the row scans. And if the optimizer is having any picking up the wrong index, or if you want to analyze what is the next best index, we can able to mark an index as an invisible and test the query performance in a live server without having to actually drop it, because dropping and recreating an index over a live server is very costly operation. And MySQL 8 allows us to create descending order index for a column, which can be helpful in optimizing the queries that with the order by operations. And MySQL 8 also introduces common table expression and window function as a new feature in MySQL 8. Like this extends the SQL capabilities that can be handled by MySQL. And for handling transactions under the concurrency, the earlier FIFO algorithm was used. So this was being prior to 8.0.20, there was contention-aware transaction scheduling, which will kick in only if there is a huge contention, like when there is a 32 plus threads waiting for the contention. Now, with the improvements that is made in this algorithm, FIFO has become a redundant algorithm, and now contention-aware transaction scheduling algorithm become a standard, which we will be able to scale on high concurrency. Apart from these all other interesting features, we are having InnoDB replica sets, which is a one layer below the InnoDB cluster. So this will be useful to configure it on a high network latency environment where the two-phase commit is not possible, or which can cause a performance impact. And in MySQL 8, we have an improved group replication. Improved group replication in the sense like faster failure handling, and it can able to chunk the message sent from one cluster to the other cluster in a better manner. So earlier, the whole chunk has to be sent at once, and this can expel the node, causing the expel timeout. Now, all these can be controlled in this controlled and configurable in 8.0 group replication. And MySQL 8 also introduces something called as resource group, where you can define what level of threads, what level of CPU cores to be assigned to what operation. For example, you can dedicate a certain number of threads in your system to a background job, and certain level of CPU threads to a user activity. And there is one more option called as histograms that helps to bucketize the column data so that the optimizer can pick up the right chunk of the data much easier. And multi-valued index. So JSON column, we can have a multi-valued index created with the function in the JSON. In explain analyze, help us to have a brief visualization on what it's an extension to the explain tree, so which gives us the stage-wise data on how the data can be, how the optimizer picks up the explain plan. And explain analyze gives us the execution time for each of the stages of the explain. And here comes the MySQL 5.7 community support. And MySQL 5.7 is going to go end of life by October 2023 as given by Oracle. And this will reflect in all the other supported database as a service platforms like RDS as well. So having said, like, we have to be prepared and plan for an upgrade to 8.0. In another 8 months, as the version is going to get end of life, we should plan for the upgrade. So that's the key motto. Like we wanted to take this presentation to explain the features of MySQL 8, so that as we can see that there is a lot of work has been gone into MySQL 8 in terms of scalability, performance, and security. And I have shared all the references in this presentation that I have used in this presentation. And this presentation will be available in our blog after this session. And thank you for your availability during this weekend. And thank you, guys.